Hello everyone, today we're going to explore something that could completely change how you see your emotional world. Picture this: you wake up in the morning, already feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You're anxious about the day ahead, or maybe you're frustrated with how yesterday turned out. Whatever it is, emotions are already taking charge. But what if I told you that, in reality, you are not your emotions? You don't have to be swept away by them. They don't own you. Now, you probably won't survive thinking this way overnight, no one does. It's a process. But before you get comfortable in that emotion-riddled zone you call your daily life, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you really enjoy what I do here. I mean, if you're stuck in a cycle of reacting emotionally to everything that happens, you might want a guide on how to break free. So, do me a favor. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to see where you're tuning in from. Now, let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. The reality is, emotions are like waves. You can't always control when they crash in or how intense they'll be, but you can control how you respond to them. They come and go, often without warning, and if you're not careful, they'll dictate the course of your life. This isn't just some philosophical mumbo-jumbo, by the way. There's actual science behind the idea that emotions are separate from who we are as people. They're just signals. And yes, they can be pretty intense, but we, our true selves, are the ones who have the ability to steer the ship. Emotions aren't the villain. In fact, they're quite the opposite. They're here to teach us something. Think of them as your personal feedback system. The tricky part, though, is realizing that you're not the passenger on this emotional roller coaster, you're the driver. But before you get to that place of emotional mastery, you've got to be willing to step back and recognize that your emotions are not who you are. They don't define you, and most importantly, they don't control you. Take a moment to think about that. If emotions don't define you, then what does? The answer, my friend, is your thoughts, your beliefs, and your actions. You, the real you, is the one who chooses how to respond to whatever emotions show up. You're the one who gets to say, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now, but this doesn't control me. I can choose how to move forward from here. This is where the magic starts happening. Once you realize that your emotional state is a temporary thing, like the weather, you can start to make different choices. You might feel angry right now, but you don't have to let that dictate how you treat the people around you. You might feel overwhelmed, but you don't have to let that cloud your judgment or actions. Did you know that scientists have proven that emotions are contagious? When you're in a room full of people, your mood can literally influence the entire atmosphere. There's a fascinating study that shows how even just smiling can trigger someone else to smile. It's like this silent, invisible force at play. So, if emotions can be contagious, doesn't that mean you have a responsibility to lead them? Instead of letting emotions run wild, you get to steer the ship, not just for your own sake but for the sake of everyone you interact with. I can already hear the questions brewing in your mind. But what about those times when emotions feel too strong to control? Well, that's a valid question. Emotions can absolutely feel overpowering. But here's the thing, they only feel that way when you don't have the tools to deal with them. And don't worry, we're going to dive deep into those tools over the next few sections. For now, just sit with this thought: your emotions are just signals, not your identity. There's a phrase that comes up often in discussions around emotional control: you are not your thoughts, you are the thinker of your thoughts. It's a great way to frame what we're talking about here. And it's true for your emotions too. You are not your emotions, you are the one who experiences them. Think of your emotions as temporary visitors in your life. Some stay for a few minutes, others linger a little longer, but none of them are permanent. This idea isn't just some feel-good concept, it's a shift in perspective that has been backed up by psychological research. There's an entire field of study called emotional intelligence that looks at how people can become more aware of their emotions and manage them more effectively. And the best part? Anyone can develop this skill. But let's pause for a second here. I want you to take a deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. Let your thoughts and feelings settle for just a moment. Acknowledge the fact that you've been through a lot of emotions in your life, and you're still here. That's powerful. And the good news? You don't have to stay stuck in any emotion. You have the power to change how you feel at any given moment. It's all in your hands. I know it might sound too good to be true, but trust me, it's not. Emotions don't have to control you, they are merely the weather, and you can decide whether you want to let the storm throw you off course or whether you'll be the calm in the center of the storm. And speaking of storms, did you know that the human brain processes emotions much faster than it does logical thoughts? In fact, emotions can travel through the brain in mere milliseconds, while logical thinking takes much longer to activate. So when you're in a stressful situation, your emotional brain is already way ahead of your rational brain. That's why it's so easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment and let emotions take over. But don't worry, we'll dive deeper into this and show you how to slow down and gain control. So, as we wrap up this section, take a moment to recognize the first big shift in your thinking: you are not your emotions. They are a part of you, but they don't define you. You are the one who has the power to decide how you move through life. And from here on out, we're going to show you exactly how to take that control. Now that we've tackled the idea that you are not your emotions, let's dive deeper into the core concept of emotional leadership. If emotions are waves, then your mind is the surfer. Without the mind guiding those waves, you'd just be tossed around, endlessly. But with practice, you can learn to ride those waves and not be controlled by them. Think about this: how many times have you found yourself in a situation where your emotions took the wheel, and you just watched yourself react? Maybe you snapped at a friend, or you spiraled into stress over a simple problem. It's so easy to let emotions dictate how we respond. But the real power lies in recognizing that your mind can, and should, lead your emotions, not the other way around. This isn't a one-and-done kind of thing, though. It takes practice, patience, and a deep understanding of how your mind works. The truth is, the mind is a powerful tool, and it's always working, whether you're aware of it or not. Your thoughts shape your feelings, and your feelings shape your actions. So if your thoughts are chaotic, guess what? Your emotions will follow suit. But what if I told you that you could actually train your mind to step in and take control over your emotional responses? Imagine being able to step back in the middle of a stressful situation and say, "Okay, I'm feeling angry, but that's not going to make this situation any better. How can I respond in a way that serves me?" Sounds pretty powerful, right? Well, that's exactly what emotional leadership is about. I want you to imagine this scenario: you're stuck in traffic, and you're already running late for an important meeting. The anger starts to build up inside you. You feel that hot rush, the tension in your chest, the urge to honk your horn and scream at the cars in front of you. It's easy to let those emotions take over. In fact, it would be the natural thing to do. But instead of letting the anger consume you, what if you could pause for a second and say, "This situation doesn't need my anger. I can still show up to my meeting on time. I'll be fine." That's emotional leadership. That's your mind taking control of the emotional surge. It's not about suppressing or denying your emotions, it's about recognizing them and choosing how to respond, rather than letting them control you. When we talk about emotional leadership, we're not talking about suppressing your feelings or pretending they don't exist. Emotions are natural. It's human to feel. The goal here is to acknowledge the emotion, recognize what's happening, and then take a step back to decide how to move forward. Instead of being at the mercy of your emotions, you lead them. You become the one in control. This idea of emotional leadership might seem like a lofty goal, but let me assure you, it's achievable. It's not about being perfect. It's about practice, awareness, and a willingness to change how you engage with your emotions. You can train your mind to become more aware of the triggers that lead to emotional outbursts, and over time, you can learn to redirect those emotions in a way that serves you and those around you. Think about emotional intelligence for a second. It's not some mysterious trait that only a few people possess. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your emotions, and to recognize and influence the emotions of others. People with high emotional intelligence are not immune to feeling emotions, they just know how to manage them effectively. They don't let emotions run the show, they take the reins. They lead their emotions with grace and awareness. A fun fact about emotional intelligence is that it's actually more important than IQ when it comes to success in life. Research shows that people with high emotional intelligence are better at managing stress, building relationships, and even making decisions. So, emotional leadership isn't just about feeling good, it's also about improving your overall well-being and success. Now, let's take a look at how the brain works in terms of emotional control. The brain is divided into different areas, and each one plays a unique role in how we process emotions. The amygdala, for example, is responsible for processing emotions like fear, anger, and excitement. It's like the emotional alarm system of your brain. When something triggers a strong emotional reaction, the amygdala kicks in, signaling your body to react. While the amygdala reacts quickly, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and decision-making, takes longer to respond. This is why it's so easy to react impulsively in emotionally charged situations. Your amygdala gets to the scene first, while your prefrontal cortex is still waking up, trying to make sense of things. Here's where the power of mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness is like a mental exercise that strengthens the connection between your emotional brain and your rational brain. When you practice mindfulness, you become more aware of your emotional reactions in the moment, giving your prefrontal cortex the chance to catch up and help you make a more rational decision. So, how can you start leading your emotions instead of letting them lead you? First, it's important to recognize the power of your mind in shaping your emotional experiences. Emotions don't just happen to you, they're influenced by the way you think about situations. If you can train your mind to recognize emotional triggers and choose a different path, you can start taking control of your emotional responses. And you might know that, your thoughts and emotions are not just abstract concepts. They can physically change the structure of your brain. This phenomenon is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. So, every time you make a conscious decision to manage your emotions and lead them, you're actually rewiring your brain to be better at emotional control. This is the beauty of emotional leadership. It's not just about controlling your emotions in the moment, it's about building the capacity to lead your emotions with intention over time. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. You'll start to notice that your emotional reactions aren't as intense, and you'll feel more in control of your inner world. Remember, emotional leadership doesn't mean being perfect. It means showing up as your best self, aware of your emotions, and choosing to respond in ways that serve your well-being. Your mind is the key to leading your emotions, and once you understand that, you'll be well on your way to emotional freedom. The illusion of control, breaking the chains. It's often said that control is an illusion. We've all heard it before, right? But what does it really mean? Well, let's unpack it. Control seems so natural to us, we want to control our surroundings, our emotions, and even other people at times. But here's the thing, when it comes to emotions, true control is often nothing more than an illusion. It feels like we can control them, but we're often just suppressing them or reacting impulsively instead of leading them. So, if emotional control is an illusion, how do we deal with it? How do we break free from the chains of emotional overwhelm? Think about it this way, have you ever tried to force yourself not to feel something? Maybe you've told yourself to just calm down when you're angry or don't be sad when you're grieving. And what happens? The more you try to control it, the more it resists. The emotion gets louder, more intense, and harder to ignore. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the more it slips away. Emotions are no different. We often mistake controlling for managing. We try to suppress, deny, or distract ourselves from our emotions rather than understanding and redirecting them. The goal isn't to control your emotions with an iron fist, it's to learn to work with them in a way that empowers you. In other words, it's not about making them go away, but about creating space for them and then choosing how you respond. This shift in perspective is critical if you want to break free from the illusion of control. Let's take a deeper look at why we're so drawn to the idea of controlling our emotions in the first place. The truth is, emotions can feel uncomfortable. Nobody enjoys feeling anxious, angry, or sad. These are all unpleasant emotions that can create a sense of vulnerability. When we feel these emotions, we often feel like we've lost control. But that feeling of losing control is just that, a feeling, not a fact. What's really happening is that we've been conditioned to view emotions as either good or bad. We label emotions like joy, love, and excitement as positive and desirable, while emotions like anger, sadness, and fear are viewed as negative and something to avoid. This dichotomy creates pressure. It encourages us to push down the emotions we don't want to feel, hoping they'll magically disappear. But the reality is, emotions don't work that way. Emotions are natural, biological responses to our environment. They're not inherently good or bad, they're just signals. For example, fear is an emotion designed to protect us from danger. Anger is a response to feeling threatened or wronged. Sadness signals that something meaningful has been lost. When we understand that emotions are simply feedback mechanisms, we can start to see them as valuable tools rather than obstacles. Think of emotions as your body's warning system. If you touch a hot stove, you pull your hand away because the pain signals to your brain that something is wrong. In the same way, when you feel anger, sadness, or anxiety, your brain is signaling that something isn't aligned with your values, your safety, or your needs. So, instead of trying to control or suppress these emotions, what if you could use them as clues? What if you could turn these emotions into something useful, something that guides you rather than holds you back? Now, let's talk about breaking the chains of emotional overwhelm. We all have those moments where it feels like emotions are just running the show. You might feel trapped in a cycle of stress, frustration, or sadness, and no matter what you do, it feels like those emotions are in charge. But remember, emotional overwhelm doesn't have to be your permanent state. You can break free from it. The key to this freedom is awareness. When you're able to recognize and name the emotions you're feeling, you take the first step toward breaking the chains. For example, if you're feeling anxious, instead of simply reacting to that anxiety, pause for a moment and ask yourself, what is this anxiety trying to tell me? Is it a warning sign? Is it pointing to something that needs attention in your life? By giving the emotion a name and understanding its source, you begin to take away its power. But awareness alone isn't enough. The next step is creating space between the emotion and your response. This is where mindfulness plays a critical role. When you practice mindfulness, you train your brain to observe your emotions without being swept up in them. You can watch the emotion pass through you, like a cloud drifting across the sky, without letting it control your actions. It's not about making the emotion go away, it's about making peace with it. And here's something interesting about the brain that might surprise you. Emotions, while they may feel uncontrollable, actually follow a predictable pattern. When an emotional trigger is activated, your brain releases a cascade of chemicals, which lead to the physical sensations we associate with emotions. These chemicals don't last forever. They peak, they hang around for a while, and then they dissipate. In fact, most emotional experiences only last around 90 seconds if you don't feed them with more thoughts or reactions. So, the key to breaking free from the illusion of control is learning how to ride out the emotional wave without adding fuel to the fire. Once you understand that emotions are temporary and that you have the ability to choose how to respond, the pressure of needing to control them starts to dissolve. You stop fighting against the flow of your emotional experience, and instead, you start riding the waves with confidence. The result? You feel more empowered, less overwhelmed, and more in control of your life. It's okay to feel emotions deeply. It's part of being human. But the goal is to stop being a passive observer of your emotions and instead become an active participant in how you engage with them. When you do that, you break free from the illusion that you must control everything. You'll find that the more you accept your emotions as they are, without judgment or resistance, the more freedom you have to move through life with peace and clarity. The path to emotional freedom isn't about forcing control, it's about embracing the ebb and flow of your emotional life. When you let go of the need to control everything and start using your emotions as guides rather than obstacles, you break the chains of emotional overwhelm. You become the master of your emotional experience, and that's a power no one can take away from you. Alright, let's dive into one of the most powerful tools you can develop, emotional intelligence, EQ. If you're familiar with the term, you've probably heard that EQ is just as, if not more, important than IQ when it comes to success in life. But what does emotional intelligence really mean, and why is it so vital to leading your emotions? Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, as well as the ability to recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. It's not some abstract concept reserved for psychology nerds, it's a real, practical skill that can drastically improve your quality of life, your relationships, and your ability to handle whatever life throws at you. We all experience emotions. Whether we like it or not, emotions are a constant companion. And while you can't control when they show up, you can control how you respond to them. The difference between someone with high emotional intelligence and someone with low emotional intelligence is the ability to manage their emotional responses. Think of it this way, imagine you're having a conversation with a friend, and they say something that really triggers you. Maybe they say something offensive or dismissive, and your initial reaction is to snap back. Now, someone with low EQ might lash out, getting defensive and fueling the fire. But someone with high EQ, even though they may still feel that surge of anger, takes a moment to pause, recognize their emotional reaction, and respond from a place of understanding instead of reactivity. That pause, that ability to separate the feeling from the reaction, is where emotional intelligence really shines. And the cool thing is, emotional intelligence isn't something you're born with, it's a skill that you can build and strengthen over time. But to do that, you first need to understand the 5 core components of emotional intelligence. 1. Self-awareness. This is the foundation of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness is the ability to recognize your own emotions as they happen and understand how they influence your thoughts and behavior. It's the ability to be in tune with your emotional state and understand why you're feeling what you're feeling. Without self-awareness, it's easy to be swept up by emotions without even realizing why you're reacting the way you are. Take a moment and think about a time when you were caught in an emotional storm. Did you recognize the emotion as it was happening? Or did it take you by surprise? The more you practice self-awareness, the more you'll be able to catch those emotions in real time and choose how to respond. 2. Self-regulation. This is the ability to manage your emotions in healthy ways. It's not about suppressing your emotions, it's about understanding them and channeling them in constructive directions. Self-regulation is what allows you to stay calm under pressure, bounce back from setbacks, and avoid impulsive actions that you might regret later. Let's say you're in a heated argument with a coworker. Your initial reaction might be to raise your voice and defend your position. But with self-regulation, you're able to pause, take a deep breath, and think about how you want to respond, rather than just reacting out of anger. It's about taking control of your emotional state so that you can make decisions that align with your values. 3. Motivation. Motivation in the context of emotional intelligence is about being driven by internal values rather than external rewards. It's about having the resilience to keep moving forward, even when things get tough. When you're emotionally intelligent, you're able to stay focused on your goals and maintain a positive outlook, regardless of the setbacks or obstacles that come your way. Think about a time when you felt demotivated. Maybe you didn't get the promotion you wanted, or you faced a setback in a personal project. How did you handle it? Someone with high emotional intelligence is able to bounce back quickly, find meaning in the setback, and keep moving forward. It's that internal drive that propels them forward, even when things get tough. 4. Empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It's one thing to recognize your own emotions, but empathy takes it a step further by allowing you to connect with the emotions of others. Empathy is what enables you to listen actively, show compassion, and respond with understanding. This doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone, but it does mean that you're able to acknowledge their feelings and see things from their perspective. Empathy is what makes you a better communicator and helps build stronger, more compassionate relationships. 5. Social skills. Finally, social skills are all about using your emotional intelligence to build healthy, productive relationships. People with strong social skills are able to communicate effectively, resolve conflicts, collaborate with others, and inspire trust. They're able to read social cues and adapt their behavior to different situations, making them great leaders, team players, and friends. It's important to understand that emotional intelligence isn't just about feeling good or getting along with everyone. It's about being able to navigate the complexities of human emotion, both your own and others, in a way that promotes understanding, connection, and growth. So why is emotional intelligence such a core skill? The answer is simple: it's the foundation of emotional leadership. When you develop emotional intelligence, you not only become more aware of your own emotions, but you also become more adept at managing them. You learn how to guide your emotions instead of being controlled by them. And you become better equipped to handle the emotional dynamics of your relationships, your work, and your life. In the workplace, for example, emotional intelligence is a key predictor of success. Leaders with high emotional intelligence are more likely to inspire their teams, resolve conflicts effectively, and make thoughtful, strategic decisions. In personal relationships, emotional intelligence helps you navigate the ups and downs of life with grace and understanding, building deeper connections with the people you care about. One of the most powerful aspects of emotional intelligence is that it can be developed. You don't need to be born with high EQ to improve it. With consistent practice and awareness, you can grow your emotional intelligence and start leading your emotions, instead of being led by them. So, as we move forward in this journey, remember that emotional intelligence is the skill you need to master if you want to truly lead your emotions. It's the key to understanding yourself, building stronger relationships, and achieving emotional freedom. And the best part? It's something you can start working on today. Okay, so why emotions emerge? A look at human nature. Let's take a step back and explore why emotions exist in the first place. Why do we, as human beings, experience these powerful, sometimes uncontrollable feelings that can either empower us or overwhelm us? Understanding why emotions emerge is crucial to understanding how to lead them. If you can trace back the roots of your emotional reactions, you'll find it's much easier to manage and direct them. At their core, emotions are survival tools. They've evolved over thousands of years to keep us alive, helping us react quickly to threats and rewarding us when we do things that benefit our survival. In the early days of humanity, when our ancestors faced constant danger from predators and environmental hazards, emotions like fear, anger, and joy were essential for quick decision-making. They helped our ancestors avoid danger, build social connections, and bond with others. Take fear, for instance. Fear is a powerful emotion designed to protect us. It triggers the fight or flight response in our bodies, releasing adrenaline and preparing us to either defend ourselves or run from danger. If you're walking through a dark alley at night and hear a sound behind you, your heart races, your senses heighten, and you're ready to take action. Fear, in this context, is life-saving. Similarly, anger serves a protective function. Anger arises when we feel threatened, wronged, or disrespected. It's the body's way of gearing up to defend itself, whether from physical harm or emotional harm. In evolutionary terms, anger helped our ancestors stand up for themselves, defend their territory, and maintain social hierarchies. Then there's joy, the emotion that rewards us for behaviors that contribute to our well-being. Joy feels good, and it's the brain's way of saying, hey, keep doing what you're doing. This is beneficial. When we find food, make a meaningful connection, or accomplish something, our bodies release dopamine, making us feel good. Joy reinforces behaviors that keep us healthy and connected with others. The problem is, while these emotional responses were essential for our survival in a world filled with immediate physical threats, we don't live in that world anymore. Sure, fear, anger, and joy still have their place, but today, the threats are different. The world is far more complex, and our emotions are often triggered by things that don't require a fight or flight response. In fact, many of the emotions we experience today have little to do with immediate survival and more to do with social and psychological factors. Consider the emotions you feel in response to modern-day stressors, work pressure, relationship issues, or financial struggles. While these things may not pose an immediate physical threat, they still activate the same emotional responses in your brain. And that's where things can get tricky. Emotions that once served to protect us from immediate physical danger can now be triggered by situations that don't require the same intense reaction. For example, stress is an emotion that has evolved to keep us alert when we're in danger. But in today's world, stress often arises from the constant bombardment of emails, phone calls, deadlines, and expectations. The response our body has to modern stressors is the same as if we were facing a physical threat, but the consequences aren't nearly as severe. This mismatch between the emotional response and the situation at hand is what leads to emotional overwhelm. Let's take another example, anger. Anger still serves its protective purpose, but often in situations that don't require a physical defense. Maybe you're angry because someone cut you off in traffic or because a colleague took credit for your idea. While these events may feel threatening, they're not life-or-death situations. Yet, your body still reacts as if they were, which can lead to unnecessary emotional flare-ups that don't help you in the long run. It's in these moments that the illusion of control can really trip us up. Our emotional systems are still wired for survival, but the threats we face now aren't physical, they're emotional and psychological. And because of this, we often feel like we're at the mercy of our emotions. We feel overwhelmed, anxious, or angry without fully understanding why. And that's when we need to step in and take control, not by fighting our emotions, but by understanding them and choosing how to respond. So, why do emotions emerge? They emerge because our brains are still using the same survival mechanisms they did thousands of years ago, even in the absence of physical threats. Emotions like fear, anger, and joy were designed to help us respond to danger, protect ourselves, and reward beneficial behaviors. But in today's world, these emotions can be triggered by situations that don't require the same response. The key to emotional mastery is recognizing that these emotions are still just signals. They're not good or bad, they're just feedback. This leads us to a critical point: emotions are not our enemies. They are tools. They're messages from our inner selves that tell us something is important. When we experience anger, it's not a sign that we're broken or wrong. It's a signal that something in our environment isn't aligned with our values. When we feel fear, it's a reminder that something is uncertain or potentially harmful, and it's our body's way of preparing us to take action. The real challenge comes when we don't understand the messages our emotions are sending. That's when emotions begin to control us, rather than us leading them. The more you can learn to recognize and interpret the emotional signals you're receiving, the better equipped you'll be to manage them. And here's an interesting fact about emotions that might surprise you: they can't be turned off. We might think that emotional numbness is a solution to feeling too much, but that's a dangerous game. When you try to suppress emotions, you don't eliminate them, you simply push them deeper, where they can fester and affect your well-being. The key is not to turn off your emotions but to understand them, process them, and then choose your response. In many ways, emotions are like the weather: they come and go, and while you can't control when they arrive or how intense they are, you can control how you respond. And when you understand why emotions emerge and how they evolve to serve you, you can start to lead them in a way that benefits your life, rather than allowing them to overwhelm you. Understanding the nature of emotions gives you the power to reframe how you view them. They're not threats or enemies, they're vital parts of your human experience. And once you accept them as such, you can begin the journey of leading them, rather than being led by them. Reframing works because it taps into the cognitive emotional connection, the idea that your thoughts influence your feelings. The way you think about a situation determines how you feel about it. If you think a traffic jam is a major setback, you'll feel anxious. But if you think of it as a small inconvenience that doesn't affect the bigger picture, your emotional response will be much less intense. An interesting fact about emotional regulation is, research shows that people who are able to regulate their emotions tend to be more resilient in the face of stress. They're better at bouncing back from setbacks and less likely to experience long-term emotional distress. This is because they've developed the skills to manage their emotions in a way that doesn't overwhelm them. They acknowledge their feelings but don't let them take control. Instead, they focus on finding solutions or shifting their mindset. One of the most effective tools for emotional regulation is deep breathing. Deep breathing is a simple yet powerful technique that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest system, helping you calm down when you're feeling anxious, angry, or stressed. The reason it works is that it physically counteracts the fight-or-flight response. When you take deep, slow breaths, you signal to your body that it's safe to relax, which helps to reduce the intensity of your emotions. A simple breathing technique to try the next time you feel overwhelmed by emotion, the 4-7-8 breathing technique. To start, breathe in quietly through your nose for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 7, and then exhale through your mouth for a count of 8. Repeat this cycle 3 times. This technique not only calms your body but also focuses your mind, helping you get out of your head and back into the present moment. Another method that ties into emotional regulation is progressive muscle relaxation. This technique involves tensing and then relaxing different muscle groups in your body, which can help release physical tension caused by strong emotions. When you're stressed or anxious, your muscles tend to tighten up, which can exacerbate your emotional state. By consciously relaxing your muscles, you can physically release that tension, which can make it easier to manage your emotions. It's a great way to ground yourself and break the cycle of emotional overwhelm. Now, let's talk about something that's easy to overlook but incredibly important: self-compassion. When emotions are running high, it's easy to get frustrated with yourself for feeling so out of control. You might think, why am I so angry? Why can't I just calm down? But here's the truth: emotions are not something to be ashamed of. They're human. And just like with any skill, emotional regulation takes time and practice. Being hard on yourself only adds more stress and frustration to the mix, making it even harder to regulate your emotions. Instead, try practicing self-compassion. When you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, offer yourself the same kindness you would offer a friend. Acknowledge the emotion without judgment, and then take the necessary steps to manage it. Self-compassion also involves accepting your emotions as they come, rather than pushing them away or denying them. When you try to suppress your feelings, they only grow stronger. Accepting your emotions doesn't mean giving in to them, it means recognizing them as part of your human experience and giving yourself permission to feel them. From there, you can decide how to respond. Let me share a simple technique that blends self-compassion with mindfulness: label your emotions. When you're feeling something intense, pause for a moment and simply name the emotion. Say to yourself, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling anxious. This simple act of labeling helps to reduce the intensity of the emotion because it gives you a sense of control. Instead of being overwhelmed by the feeling, you're acknowledging it, which makes it easier to navigate. Emotional regulation is not about making your emotions disappear. It's about learning to be with them in a way that allows you to respond, rather than react. It's about creating a space between the emotion and your behavior, so that you can make a conscious choice about how you want to act. The more you practice these techniques, the easier it becomes to manage your emotions, and the less power they have over you. Remember, emotional regulation is a skill that anyone can learn and improve. With practice, you'll find that you not only become more adept at managing your emotions, but you also become more resilient in the face of life's challenges. You'll be able to lead your emotions instead of being led by them, which is the key to living a more peaceful, empowered life. Let's talk about something that might sting a little: perfection. You know, that unreachable standard that we're all taught to aspire to, whether it's in our careers, relationships, or even our emotional lives. Society has this weird obsession with perfection. It's often painted as the ultimate goal, the shiny prize at the end of the rainbow. But here's the harsh truth: perfection is a myth. And when it comes to emotions, chasing after some ideal of perfect emotional control can actually hurt you more than it helps. It's tempting to believe that emotional mastery means being perfectly in control of your emotions at all times, right? To never get angry, never feel sad, and always be calm, collected, and rational. But here's the thing: that's not reality. The reality is that emotions are messy, unpredictable, and part of being human. And trying to suppress or control them to achieve some image of perfection will only leave you feeling more frustrated and disconnected. Imagine this: you've had a long, stressful day at work. You're tired, your patience is thin, and you're just about to lose it. But then, you remember, I'm trying to be emotionally perfect. I shouldn't be angry. I should be calm and zen. So, instead of acknowledging your anger, you push it down, telling yourself, don't feel that way. That's not acceptable. But guess what? That anger doesn't go away. It sits inside you, festering, until it eventually erupts in a way that's out of your control. In this case, the pursuit of perfection, of suppressing the emotion, actually made the situation worse. This is why accepting your emotional self is so important. Instead of viewing your emotions as something to be fixed or eliminated, what if you could simply accept them as they are? Anger, sadness, anxiety, joy, these emotions aren't wrong or bad. They're part of the human experience. They are signals, each one carrying its own message. And the more you fight them, the more powerful they become. I know, accepting emotions, especially the difficult ones, sounds like an easy thing to say, but hard to actually do. But it's absolutely necessary if you want to truly lead your emotions instead of being controlled by them. When you accept your emotional state, you stop running from it. You stop trying to push it away, hide it, or force it to change. Instead, you allow yourself to feel the emotion fully, without judgment. This concept is often referred to as emotional acceptance. Emotional acceptance doesn't mean you have to like the way you feel, it just means you acknowledge that your feelings are valid and that it's okay to feel what you feel. For example, if you're feeling sad, emotional acceptance means recognizing that sadness is a natural response to a loss, disappointment, or challenging situation. You don't need to immediately fix it or deny it. Instead, you can give yourself permission to feel the sadness, process it, and move through it. This example illustrates emotional acceptance in practice. Let's say you're feeling anxious before an important presentation. Instead of trying to fight the anxiety or pretend it's not there, you acknowledge it. You might say to yourself, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. That's normal, especially given the situation. I can work with this. By accepting your anxiety, you remove its power over you. You can take a few deep breaths, refocus your energy, and approach the presentation with more confidence, rather than trying to push the anxiety away, which would likely only make it worse. This is where self-compassion comes in, too. It's easy to be hard on ourselves when we're feeling overwhelmed by emotions. We often think, why am I so weak for feeling this way, or, I shouldn't be angry, I should be calm. But being compassionate toward yourself in these moments helps you accept your emotions without judgment. You can say, it's okay that I feel this way. It's part of being human. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be honest with myself. You see, emotional acceptance is about releasing the myth of perfection and embracing the reality of your emotions. No one is perfectly calm, happy, or balanced all the time. The goal isn't to be emotionless or always in control, the goal is to be aware of your emotions and to manage them with understanding and compassion. Perfection doesn't have room for messiness, but life is messy. Emotions are messy. And that's perfectly okay. The more you allow yourself to feel what you feel, the more you empower yourself. You're no longer fighting an internal battle of, I shouldn't feel this way, and you're no longer running away from your emotions. Instead, you're choosing to acknowledge them and respond in a way that aligns with your values. This shift in perspective makes all the difference. You don't have to be perfect. In fact, perfectionism can actually keep you stuck. It keeps you focused on the goal of never feeling bad emotions, which only makes them harder to process. It creates shame and resistance. But when you accept your emotional self, you can move through those feelings with greater ease, knowing that they're just temporary states, not a reflection of your worth or identity. There's a profound freedom in letting go of perfection. You free yourself from the pressure to be always happy, and you start to see emotions for what they really are, signals, not judgments. And the more you practice emotional acceptance, the more you'll notice that your emotions have less power over you. You'll no longer be caught in a cycle of trying to avoid or control your feelings, and instead, you'll be able to choose your response from a place of awareness and understanding. The myth of perfection is powerful because it's something we've been conditioned to chase. But the truth is, no one is perfect, and that's the beauty of it. Our imperfections, our emotions, our reactions, our messy human experiences, are what make us real, relatable, and deeply connected to others. When we accept ourselves fully, we can truly begin to lead our emotions, rather than being held hostage by them. So, let's put perfection aside. Let's embrace our emotional selves, with all their beauty and mess. In doing so, we can step into the power of emotional mastery, because true strength lies in accepting ourselves as we are. The power of choice, reframing your emotional reactions. By now, you've probably realized that the key to leading your emotions is not about controlling or suppressing them, it's about making conscious choices about how to respond. And that's exactly what I want to focus on in this section, the power of choice. The ability to reframe your emotional reactions is one of the most powerful tools in your emotional toolkit. It allows you to step out of the automatic, reactive cycle and choose a response that serves you, rather than being at the mercy of your emotions. We've all had those moments where emotions take over, right? Maybe you get frustrated when someone cuts you off in traffic, or you feel a pang of anxiety when you're about to speak in front of a group. In those moments, it's easy to feel like you have no control. It's like emotions swoop in, and suddenly you're caught in a whirlwind of feelings. But the truth is, you always have a choice. It might not feel like it in the heat of the moment, but with practice, you can train yourself to pause, observe, and choose your response rather than letting emotions dictate your actions. One of the most effective ways to shift from reaction to response is reframing. Reframing is simply the act of changing the way you view a situation or event, and in doing so, changing the way you feel about it. Instead of seeing a situation as a threat or a problem, you can reframe it as an opportunity for growth or learning. Let's break that down a little. Imagine this scenario: you've just received some critical feedback from your boss. Your initial reaction might be to feel defensive or upset. You could easily get angry or frustrated, thinking, why are they picking on me? I've been working hard. But what if, instead of reacting with defensiveness, you reframe the situation? You could look at the feedback as a valuable opportunity to improve. Okay, they pointed out some areas where I can grow. This is a chance to learn and get better at what I do. This shift in perspective might not immediately make you feel happy about the feedback, but it will help you move from a place of frustration to one of growth and empowerment. Reframing works because it taps into the power of cognitive restructuring, the idea that our thoughts influence our emotions. When we change the way we think about a situation, we change the way we feel about it. And the beauty of reframing is that it allows you to gain control over your emotional responses. Instead of being a victim to your emotions, you become the creator of your emotional experience. You might try this easy technique: the next time you're faced with a challenging situation that triggers a strong emotional reaction, pause for a moment and ask yourself, what's another way I can look at this? For example, if you feel frustrated at work because a project isn't going as planned, ask yourself, what can I learn from this situation? How can I make the best of it? Reframing challenges as opportunities doesn't eliminate the discomfort, but it helps you move through it with more resilience. Another technique related to reframing is perspective taking. This involves trying to see a situation from someone else's point of view. It's especially useful in situations where emotions like anger or resentment arise. If someone does something that frustrates you, instead of immediately reacting, take a step back and ask yourself, what might they be going through? Why did they act this way? This doesn't mean you have to excuse poor behavior, but it helps you detach from the emotional charge and respond with more understanding. Let's say you're upset because a colleague took credit for your idea in a meeting. Your instinct might be to feel angry or betrayed. But by practicing perspective taking, you might consider that your colleague didn't realize the impact of their actions or that they were trying to impress their boss. When you see the situation from their perspective, the anger you feel may lessen, and you might choose a more constructive way to address the issue. When you practice perspective taking, you not only improve your emotional regulation but also your empathy. And empathy, as we discussed earlier, is a cornerstone of emotional intelligence. The more you practice reframing and perspective taking, the better you'll become at understanding others' emotions, which will ultimately strengthen your relationships and communication skills. Now, let's talk about self-talk, the internal dialogue that you have with yourself. Our self-talk has a huge impact on how we feel. When we're faced with a challenging situation, the things we say to ourselves can either fuel our emotional reactions or help us stay calm and focused. For example, if you make a mistake at work and think, "I'm such an idiot. I always mess things up," you're more likely to feel ashamed, embarrassed, and discouraged. But if you reframe that self-talk to something more constructive, like, "I made a mistake, but I can learn from this and do better next time," you'll feel empowered instead of defeated. The language you use in your self-talk can shape your emotional experience, so it's important to be aware of the narratives you create in your mind. Negative self-talk often fuels negative emotions, while positive or neutral self-talk can help you manage your feelings and stay grounded. It's not about pretending everything is perfect, it's about choosing to see things through a lens of self-compassion and growth. This is why mindfulness plays such an important role in reframing your emotional reactions. When you're mindful, you become more aware of your thoughts and the stories you're telling yourself. You can observe your emotions without getting swept away by them, and you can notice when your self-talk is negative or unhelpful. Once you're aware of your thoughts, you can consciously choose to reframe them, leading to a shift in how you feel. At the heart of it lies your ability to reframe emotional responses, and that means you hold the power to decide how you want to engage with any situation. Rather than being driven by your emotions, you become the driver. You can choose to meet the moment with empathy, patience, humor, or calm, whatever feels right for the context. This shift allows you to move through life with greater emotional stability and far less impulsive reactivity. Think about the times when you've been caught in a cycle of emotional reactivity. You might have said or done something you regretted because you didn't pause to choose your response. The beauty of reframing is that it allows you to step out of that cycle. You don't have to be controlled by your automatic emotional reactions. Instead, you can observe your emotions, reframe your thoughts, and choose a response that aligns with your values. Ultimately, the power of choice means that you're no longer a slave to your emotions. You're the one in charge. And with practice, reframing your emotional reactions will become second nature. Instead of reacting out of habit, you'll be able to respond with intention and clarity, making each emotional experience a step toward greater emotional freedom. If there's one thing that can anchor you in the storm of your emotions, it's mindfulness. You've probably heard of mindfulness before. It's that thing people talk about when they want to reduce stress or improve their mental well-being. But what does mindfulness actually have to do with emotional awareness? And why is it so effective in helping us manage our emotions instead of being controlled by them? At its core, mindfulness is the practice of being fully present in the moment, without judgment. It's about observing your thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations as they arise, without getting swept up by them. When you practice mindfulness, you develop a heightened awareness of what's going on inside your mind and body. And this awareness is what gives you the power to take control of your emotional responses. Let's break this down. Imagine you're in a stressful situation, maybe you're juggling multiple projects at work, and your to-do list is never ending. Your thoughts are racing, and you're feeling overwhelmed. If you're not mindful, it's easy to let those feelings of stress spiral out of control. You might start worrying about how you're going to get everything done, feeling anxious about the future, and becoming frustrated with the present moment. But when you bring mindfulness into the equation, you stop for a moment and observe what's going on inside. You recognize that you're feeling stressed, and you take a few deep breaths to ground yourself. You notice your body's physical response to stress, maybe your shoulders are tense or your heart is racing, and you acknowledge it without judgment. Instead of getting lost in the emotion, you become the observer of it. And by doing so, you create space between the emotion and your reaction. Mindfulness helps you step back from your emotions and see them for what they are, temporary experiences that don't define you. Instead of reacting impulsively to your stress or frustration, you can choose how to respond. Maybe you decide to take a short break, prioritize your tasks, or ask for help. Whatever you choose, the point is that mindfulness gives you the ability to act consciously rather than react automatically. Mindfulness doesn't eliminate emotions. It doesn't make your stress or anger go away. But what it does is allow you to experience those emotions without being controlled by them. Instead of being swept away by a wave of negative feelings, mindfulness helps you ride the wave, observing it without judgment, and responding in a way that aligns with your values. The beauty of mindfulness is that it's a skill you can practice and improve over time. The more you practice mindfulness, the more you develop emotional awareness. You start to recognize patterns in your emotional responses. Maybe you tend to get anxious in social situations or frustrated when things don't go as planned. By noticing these patterns, you can begin to understand the underlying causes of your emotions and start to shift your reactions. Mindfulness also helps you build emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is the ability to bounce back from difficult situations and manage your emotions in a healthy way. Life isn't always smooth sailing, and difficult emotions are a part of the journey. But when you practice mindfulness, you learn to navigate those difficult emotions with grace. You learn to accept them, process them, and move forward, rather than letting them overwhelm you. Now, let's talk about a specific mindfulness practice that's especially powerful for emotional awareness: focused attention meditation. This meditation involves sitting quietly, closing your eyes, and focusing on your breath. As you inhale and exhale, you notice the sensations of your breath entering and leaving your body. Whenever your mind starts to wander, because, let's be honest, it will, you gently bring your attention back to your breath, without judgment. This simple practice trains your brain to stay present, which is the foundation of mindfulness. And as you become more attuned to your breath, you also become more attuned to your emotions. You begin to notice the subtle shifts in your emotional state. Maybe your heart rate increases when you think about a challenging conversation, or your stomach tightens when you're worried about something. With mindfulness, you're able to recognize these physical sensations and connect them to the emotions that are arising. What's interesting about mindfulness is that it not only improves emotional awareness but also emotional regulation. When you practice mindfulness, you create space between the emotional trigger and your response. This allows you to choose a more thoughtful, measured reaction, rather than immediately being swept away by whatever emotion is bubbling up inside you. Mindfulness isn't just about sitting still and meditating. It's about bringing awareness into your everyday life. You can practice mindfulness while washing dishes, walking to work, or having a conversation with a friend. The key is to be fully present in whatever you're doing, without getting lost in your thoughts or emotions. When you do this, you start to cultivate a sense of calm and awareness that extends beyond your meditation practice and into your daily life. But mindfulness has been shown to physically change the brain. Studies have found that regular mindfulness practice increases the thickness of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation. This means that the more you practice mindfulness, the more you strengthen the areas of your brain that help you manage your emotions effectively. In addition to increasing emotional awareness, mindfulness also enhances your empathy and compassion. When you practice mindfulness, you become more attuned to your own emotions, which makes you more attuned to the emotions of others. This allows you to respond with greater empathy and understanding when someone else is experiencing strong feelings. And as you become more compassionate toward yourself and others, you create a positive feedback loop that fosters emotional connection and emotional growth. Another fascinating thing about mindfulness is its ability to reduce the intensity of negative emotions. When you're mindful, you're not suppressing your emotions or pushing them away, you're simply observing them without attaching judgment. This reduces the emotional charge that comes with feelings like anger, anxiety, or sadness. You can experience these emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them, which allows you to respond more thoughtfully and intentionally. So, how can you incorporate mindfulness into your life? It starts with small moments of awareness. You don't need to sit for hours in meditation, although that's a great practice if you have the time. But mindfulness can be as simple as taking a few deep breaths before reacting to a stressful situation or checking in with your emotions throughout the day. The more you practice, the more natural it will become to stay present and aware of your emotional state. Remember, mindfulness is the key to emotional awareness. It gives you the ability to observe your emotions without getting swept away by them, and it helps you make intentional choices about how to respond. By practicing mindfulness, you're not only strengthening your emotional awareness but also cultivating emotional resilience, empathy, and compassion. Mindfulness doesn't eliminate difficult emotions, but it allows you to experience them with greater clarity and control. When you practice mindfulness, you can ride the waves of your emotions rather than being tossed around by them. From reaction to response, shifting your emotional habits. We've all been there, caught in a rush of emotions, reacting impulsively, and later regretting the way we responded. The thing is, emotional reactions are automatic. They're like knee-jerk responses that happen before we have a chance to think. But here's the golden nugget of wisdom: we don't have to stay stuck in the cycle of reacting emotionally to every situation. With practice, we can shift from reactive emotional habits to responsive, intentional actions. This shift is what will truly empower you to lead your emotions, rather than letting them lead you. Let's start by understanding why we're so prone to reacting in the first place. When an emotional trigger hits, whether it's a stressful situation at work, an argument with a friend, or a frustrating delay, you're often hit with an immediate, instinctual emotional response. Your brain, specifically the amygdala, fires off an emotional reaction based on past experiences, survival instincts, and the perception of threat. In the face of stress, fear, anger, or anxiety, your brain's first reaction is to act quickly, to get you out of harm's way or to protect yourself. It's a natural response, deeply embedded in our biology. But the problem with this quick, reactive approach is that it doesn't leave much room for rational thought. You're on autopilot, and emotions like anger, frustration, or anxiety can get the best of you. And when emotions take the wheel, your rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, often gets left behind. This is when things like impulsive outbursts, snap judgments, and knee-jerk reactions happen. However, here's the truth: emotional reactivity is a habit, and like all habits, it can be changed. The key to shifting from reaction to response is developing the pause, the ability to step back before responding. This pause gives you the space to observe your emotions without being consumed by them. It's the moment when you don't just react automatically, you respond intentionally. The first step in this shift is self-awareness. You have to be able to recognize when you're getting caught in a reactive emotional loop. This is where mindfulness comes in handy. When you're mindful, you can catch yourself as soon as the emotional charge hits, and you can make a conscious choice to pause. You can say to yourself, "Okay, I'm feeling angry right now. What's going on? Why am I feeling this way?" This simple act of noticing the emotion allows you to detach from it and create space for a more thoughtful response. Another crucial tool in breaking reactive habits is cognitive reframing, the practice of changing the way you interpret a situation to change your emotional response. This goes hand in hand with shifting from reaction to response. For example, let's say you're frustrated with a colleague who keeps interrupting you in meetings. Your immediate reaction might be to get defensive or angry, but that's not necessarily going to solve the problem or help the situation. Instead, you could reframe the situation by asking yourself, what could be going on for this person? Maybe they're just really excited to contribute, or maybe they don't realize they're interrupting. This shift in perspective doesn't change the fact that you're feeling frustrated, but it helps you move from a place of reaction, anger, to a place of understanding and constructive response. When you pause to reflect on your emotional triggers and reframe your thoughts, you're essentially rewiring your emotional habits. Over time, these new habits, of pausing, reframing, and responding thoughtfully, become ingrained in your behavior. You move from being controlled by your emotions to being the one who controls them. The shift from reaction to response doesn't happen overnight. It requires practice, self-awareness, and a commitment to breaking old patterns. But with time, it becomes second nature. An example of how this plays out in real life is through emotional regulation exercises. These are small, intentional actions you can take in the heat of the moment to break the cycle of reactivity. When you feel an intense emotion bubbling up, whether it's anger, anxiety, or frustration, take a deep breath. It sounds simple, but it works. Deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps to calm your body and mind. It signals to your brain that you're safe, that there's no immediate threat. This simple act of pausing to breathe can be enough to stop the flood of emotional reactions from taking over. You can try to shift your emotional habits, the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. It's a mindfulness exercise that helps you shift your focus from emotional reactivity to the present moment. When you feel overwhelmed, take a moment to ground yourself by engaging your senses. 1. 5 things you can see. Look around and identify 5 things you can see. 2. 4 things you can feel. Notice 4 sensations you can feel, e.g., the texture of your clothes, the chair beneath you, etc. 3. 3 things you can hear. Listen for 3 distinct sounds in your environment. 4. 2 things you can smell. If you're in a space with scents, notice 2. 5. 1 thing you can taste. Pay attention to the taste in your mouth, even if it's just the aftertaste of something you've eaten or drank. This exercise pulls you out of the emotional intensity of the moment and brings you back to the present, where you have the power to choose your response. This practice ties directly into emotional resilience, which is the ability to bounce back from emotional setbacks and handle life stressors in a healthy way. By building emotional resilience, you become better at handling situations without being overwhelmed by your emotions. The more you practice responding, rather than reacting, the more emotionally resilient you become. Another key aspect of this shift is learning how to slow down your emotional responses. Often, when we're caught up in the heat of an emotion, everything feels urgent. We feel like we have to react immediately, or else the situation will get worse. But the truth is, emotions don't need to be acted on right away. In fact, slowing down gives you the chance to consider your options and make a more intentional choice. You might find that what seemed like a huge issue at first doesn't need to be handled immediately, or that your emotional response is actually more extreme than the situation calls for. Slowing down allows you to see things from a more grounded, rational perspective. The shift from reaction to response is ultimately about gaining control over your emotional habits. It's about moving from a place of emotional chaos to emotional mastery. The more you practice pausing, reframing, and slowing down, the more empowered you become. You no longer have to feel like a victim of your emotions. Instead, you become the leader of your emotional world, choosing your responses based on your values, not your impulses. This shift is also deeply connected to your ability to let go of the need for perfection. You'll realize that emotional mastery doesn't mean never feeling upset or angry, it means learning how to respond in a way that's aligned with who you want to be. When you let go of the need for perfection, you can embrace your emotions as part of the human experience. You're not trying to suppress them or avoid them, you're simply learning to respond to them with intention and awareness. In the end, shifting from reaction to response is about transforming your emotional habits from automatic, impulsive reactions to intentional, conscious responses. It takes practice, but with each moment you pause and choose a different response, you're building a more empowered, emotionally intelligent version of yourself. We've talked a lot about how to manage and regulate emotions, but here's an important concept that many people overlook: emotions aren't just signals of something gone wrong. They're also powerful sources of feedback, guiding you toward deeper insights about yourself, your environment, and your relationships. In this section, I want to dive into the idea of emotions as feedback, and how understanding their messages can empower you to make better decisions, align with your values, and live a more fulfilled life. When we think of emotions, we often view them through a lens of good and bad. We want to feel joy, excitement, and love, while we try to avoid emotions like anger, sadness, and fear. But this binary way of thinking only limits our understanding of emotions. In reality, emotions are neither inherently good nor bad. They are neutral signals that give us crucial information about what's going on inside and around us. Take anger, for example. Most people view anger as a negative emotion to be avoided or suppressed. But anger can actually be a very useful emotion. It's a signal that something isn't right. Maybe someone is treating you unfairly, or a situation is violating your personal boundaries. Anger alerts you to the fact that you feel threatened or disrespected, and it can propel you to take action, whether it's standing up for yourself, setting a boundary, or addressing the issue head-on. The key here is not to suppress the anger, but to recognize its underlying message. What is this anger telling me about my needs or values? Similarly, sadness often carries a message of loss. It's a natural emotional response when something or someone you care about is no longer present in your life. Sadness is a signal that something significant is missing or has changed. Instead of pushing it away or labeling it as negative, you can allow sadness to guide you toward self-compassion, reflection, and healing. It might help you recognize the value of what you've lost and give you a better understanding of what you truly care about. In this way, sadness can lead you to deeper emotional growth. Fear, too, serves as a protective mechanism. It's often triggered by the perception of danger or uncertainty, whether real or imagined. Fear can motivate you to prepare for the worst, stay safe, and make decisions that protect your well-being. However, not all fears are based on real threats. Sometimes, our minds amplify fear based on past experiences or worries about the future. This is why it's so important to examine the fear, identify whether it's grounded in reality, and determine whether it's serving your best interests. Fear isn't a bad emotion, it's a signal that you need to pay attention to something that could be important. When you understand that fear is there to protect you, you can face it with more awareness and less anxiety. What I want you to take away from all of this is that emotions are essentially like internal GPS systems, providing you with real-time feedback about your life and your surroundings. Instead of viewing emotions as disruptions or inconveniences, you can start seeing them as information. Emotions point you toward what matters to you, what you value, and where you need to pay attention in your life. The better you understand the messages your emotions are sending, the better equipped you'll be to respond effectively. Now, let's take a look at how you can interpret your emotions as feedback in more practical terms. The first step is awareness, paying attention to what you're feeling and taking a moment to ask yourself why you're feeling it. You can do this through mindfulness or journaling, but the key is to stop and inquire, what is the purpose of this emotion? What is it trying to tell me about my needs, desires, or boundaries? For example, if you're feeling anxiety before a presentation, you might initially want to label it as negative and try to push it away. But instead, ask yourself, what is this anxiety telling me? Perhaps it's pointing out a lack of preparation or an area where you need more practice. Or maybe it's signaling that you care deeply about performing well and making a positive impression. Once you identify the message behind the emotion, you can address it. You might prepare more thoroughly, practice your speech, or even simply remind yourself that anxiety is normal in high-stakes situations. Similarly, if you're feeling angry at a friend or partner, don't rush to dismiss or justify the emotion. Take a moment to ask, what is this anger telling me about my relationship with this person? It could be a signal that your boundaries have been crossed, that your needs aren't being met, or that there's unresolved tension. Once you've identified the root cause of your anger, you can address the issue constructively by communicating your feelings, setting boundaries, or working through the issue together. In this way, your emotions become data points, helpful indicators of what's going on in your inner world. When you treat emotions as valuable feedback, you can move from reaction to awareness, and from awareness to thoughtful, informed action. Another way to harness your emotions as feedback is to reflect on past emotional experiences. Think about a time when you felt strong emotions, whether positive or negative, and ask yourself, what did I learn from that experience? Maybe you realized that you were pushing yourself too hard at work and needed to prioritize self-care. Or maybe you realized that a particular relationship was draining you, and it was time to set some boundaries. Emotional reflection allows you to see patterns in your behavior and make changes where necessary. For example, if you consistently feel anxious before social events, it's worth exploring why. Is it because you feel like you have to be on all the time, or is it because of underlying insecurities? When you understand the root cause of your emotional patterns, you can take action to address the issue, whether it's learning how to manage social anxiety, setting boundaries, or embracing self-compassion. Another key point to remember is that emotions are temporary. They're not permanent states. When you view emotions as temporary feedback, it's easier to process them without letting them take over your life. You can recognize that anger, fear, or sadness will eventually pass, and during that time, you can use them as opportunities for growth. Instead of letting negative emotions linger and dictate your behavior, you can let them inform your decisions and then move forward with greater clarity and purpose. By learning to interpret emotions as feedback, you shift your perspective from one of avoidance or suppression to one of acceptance and understanding. You no longer fear your emotions or see them as obstacles, you see them as your allies, guiding you toward a deeper understanding of yourself and your needs. So, next time you find yourself feeling something strong, whether it's joy, frustration, fear, or anything in between, take a step back and ask, what is this emotion trying to tell me? By doing so, you transform your emotional experience from something uncontrollable into something empowering. We've spent a lot of time exploring how emotions arise, how to manage them, and how to understand their messages. But now it's time to look at something equally important, breaking free from those emotional habits that seem to trap us in a cycle of reactivity. You know the ones I'm talking about, those patterns of emotional responses that feel automatic, as though they're on a loop, running in the background of your life. Maybe it's the tendency to get defensive when criticized, or the reflexive anxiety that comes up in social situations. These emotional habits often govern our behavior without us even realizing it. However, there's something important to note, just because an emotional response has become a habit doesn't mean it's set in stone. You have the power to break the cycle and create new emotional patterns that align with who you truly want to be. The process of breaking free from emotional habits starts with understanding why those habits exist and how they continue to play out. Emotional habits are often born out of repetition. Think about it, when you experience an emotion in a particular context, say, feeling anger when someone interrupts you, it creates a neural pathway in your brain. The more this pattern is repeated, the stronger that neural pathway becomes. Over time, it becomes almost automatic. The next time someone interrupts you, your brain jumps to the same emotional response, anger. It's a learned behavior, and like all learned behaviors, it can be unlearned. The key to breaking the cycle is awareness. You first need to recognize when you're slipping into a familiar emotional pattern. This is where mindfulness comes in handy. By practicing mindfulness, you can catch yourself before the emotion takes over, giving you the space to decide how you want to respond. For example, when you feel yourself getting angry in a conversation, mindfulness allows you to notice the rising emotion without immediately reacting. You can observe it, ask yourself why it's happening, and then choose a more measured response, rather than defaulting to your usual habit of lashing out. But awareness alone isn't enough to break the cycle. You need to actively work on interrupting your emotional patterns. This is where things get interesting. The more you practice interrupting your habitual emotional responses, the more you create new, healthier pathways in your brain. Here's how you can do it. Start by practicing a technique called cognitive restructuring, which involves changing the way you think about a situation. For example, if you've always felt anxious in social situations, you can reframe your thoughts by telling yourself, "It's okay to feel anxious, but I can handle this. I don't have to be perfect. I'm here to enjoy myself, and I can take things at my own pace." This shift in thought helps disrupt the cycle of anxiety, and over time, the emotional response becomes less automatic. Another powerful technique is behavioral substitution. This involves replacing your habitual emotional response with a more positive or constructive behavior. For example, if your go-to reaction to stress is to shut down and withdraw, you can substitute that with a healthier coping strategy, like taking a walk, talking to a friend, or practicing deep breathing. The goal is to replace the old emotional habit with something that helps you manage your feelings in a more effective way. It's also important to remember that breaking emotional habits takes time. Old patterns don't dissolve overnight. But with consistent practice and self-compassion, you'll start to notice a shift in how you respond to challenging situations. Instead of getting caught in the same emotional loop, you'll begin to respond with greater awareness and intentionality. In addition to mindfulness and cognitive restructuring, you can also try journaling to identify and break free from emotional habits. Journaling allows you to reflect on your emotions and gain insight into your triggers and patterns. When you journal about a situation that caused a strong emotional reaction, ask yourself the following questions. 1. What was I feeling? Name the emotion. 2. Why did I feel that way? Identify the trigger. 3. How did I react? Notice the habitual response. 4. What could I do differently next time? Brainstorm healthier responses. Writing down your thoughts and feelings can help you recognize patterns that you might not have noticed before. It can also provide clarity on how you can shift your emotional responses in the future. This reflection helps to reinforce new emotional habits, turning them into more automatic, positive patterns over time. Another powerful strategy for breaking emotional cycles is self-compassion. Often, when we're stuck in negative emotional patterns, we criticize ourselves for not being better at managing our emotions. But the truth is, breaking old habits is challenging, and it requires patience and understanding. When you make a mistake or fall into a familiar emotional pattern, practice self-compassion. Be gentle with yourself. Understand that emotional growth is a process, and every step you take is progress, even if it's small. One aspect of self-compassion that's often overlooked is forgiveness, specifically, forgiving yourself for past emotional reactions. If you've spent years reacting in a certain way, it's easy to get frustrated with yourself for not being able to change faster. But holding on to guilt or self-blame only reinforces the old emotional habit. Instead, practice self-forgiveness. Acknowledge that you're doing your best, and recognize that every emotional response is an opportunity to learn and grow. This might surprise you. Research has shown that neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, plays a key role in breaking emotional habits. The more you practice new emotional responses, the more your brain forms new pathways. These new pathways become stronger over time, and eventually, the old emotional patterns begin to fade. This process of rewiring the brain takes consistent practice, but it's entirely possible with dedication. The final piece of the puzzle is persistence. Emotional habits don't change overnight. It takes time, effort, and dedication to break free from them. But every time you practice a new emotional response, you're chipping away at the old patterns and replacing them with healthier ones. Over time, this creates a new emotional baseline, one where you're less reactive and more intentional in how you respond to life's challenges. Breaking the cycle of emotional habits is not about perfection, it's about progress. It's about recognizing the emotional patterns that no longer serve you and taking consistent steps to replace them with healthier, more empowering habits. As you continue on this journey, remember that it's okay to slip up. What matters is that you keep practicing, keep learning, and keep growing. Over time, you'll find that you've created new, more constructive emotional habits that empower you to navigate life with greater awareness, resilience, and peace. Living beyond emotions, how to lead your life. Now that we've explored how to understand, regulate, and break free from emotional patterns, it's time to talk about living beyond emotions. This may sound counterintuitive, considering how much attention we've paid to understanding emotions, but the goal isn't to eradicate or control them completely, it's to live a life where your emotions don't dominate your decisions, actions, or sense of self. When you lead your emotions rather than being led by them, you unlock a greater sense of freedom, clarity, and peace in your life. The truth is, emotions are an essential part of the human experience. We don't want to live in a world where we don't feel joy, excitement, love, or even sadness and anger. These emotions are part of what makes us deeply human. But while emotions are important, they don't have to run the show. In fact, you can live a life that's guided by your values, principles, and long-term goals, not just by the whims of whatever emotion happens to arise in the moment. Living beyond emotion starts with clarity of purpose. When you have a clear sense of what matters most to you, your goals, values, and the life you want to create, your emotional reactions become easier to navigate. Instead of making decisions based on fleeting emotional impulses, you can make them from a place of alignment with your deeper desires and long-term vision. For example, if one of your core values is personal growth, and you find yourself in a situation where you feel insecure or doubtful, you might be tempted to react by retreating or avoiding the challenge. However, if you have a clear understanding of your goal of personal growth, you can consciously choose to face the fear, knowing that growth often comes from stepping outside your comfort zone. In this way, your values and goals guide you, rather than your emotions pulling you in different directions. The power of purpose is incredibly transformative. When you align your life with your values, your emotional state becomes much less influential in your decision-making. You start to see emotions for what they are, temporary states that will pass, while your deeper values and purpose remain steady and unshaken. The more you align with your purpose, the less reactive you become to the ups and downs of your emotions. You learn to see them as passing clouds, while you remain grounded in the earth beneath you. This isn't to say that emotions don't matter in decision-making. Far from it. Emotions provide valuable feedback and offer insight into what we care about. The goal here is to live in a way that transcends emotional reactivity, allowing you to make choices based on your deepest priorities rather than your momentary feelings. Living beyond emotions also requires cultivating emotional maturity, the ability to navigate life with resilience, grace, and emotional wisdom. Emotional maturity is about recognizing that emotions don't need to be fixed or avoided, they simply need to be experienced, understood, and processed. With emotional maturity, you no longer run away from discomfort or try to suppress difficult emotions. You face them head-on, learning from them and allowing them to pass, rather than allowing them to dominate your thoughts or behaviors. Think of emotional maturity as a muscle. The more you practice responding to emotions with awareness and purpose, the stronger that muscle becomes. It's about learning to recognize when emotions are guiding you towards something important and when they're merely clouding your judgment. Emotional maturity also involves being compassionate with yourself and others, understanding that everyone is on their own emotional journey, and that we all experience setbacks and challenges. Another key aspect of living beyond emotions is mindful detachment. This might sound a bit counterintuitive, but detachment here doesn't mean being indifferent or disconnected. It means cultivating the ability to step back from your emotional responses without judgment. It's about observing your emotions without letting them define you. By practicing mindful detachment, you create space between the emotion and the decision you need to make. Instead of acting impulsively or based on fear, you give yourself the time and space to respond from a place of clarity. For instance, when faced with a challenging decision, instead of jumping into action based on anxiety or frustration, you can pause, breathe, and observe those emotions. You might say to yourself, "I'm feeling anxious right now, but that's okay. I can still make a clear decision based on what truly matters to me." This mindful detachment allows you to take a step back, see the situation from a more objective perspective, and make decisions that are aligned with your deeper goals. In addition to mindful detachment, self-compassion plays a crucial role in living beyond emotions. When you stop expecting yourself to be perfect and allow yourself to experience emotions without judgment, you give yourself the freedom to learn and grow. Self-compassion means giving yourself grace in moments of emotional struggle and understanding that you're a work in progress. When you're kind to yourself during emotional challenges, you can move through difficult feelings without getting stuck in them. Instead of seeing your emotions as obstacles, you can view them as part of your ongoing journey toward emotional mastery. One powerful way to live beyond emotions is to regularly engage in practices that reconnect you with your inner self. These practices, whether it's meditation, journaling, nature walks, or creative expression, help you cultivate a deeper sense of inner peace and self-awareness. The more in touch you are with your true self, the less likely you are to be swayed by external emotional triggers. You'll find that your inner calm becomes your default state, no matter what's happening around you. Ultimately, living beyond emotions is about empowerment. It's about reclaiming your ability to choose your responses, no matter what emotions arise. It's about creating a life where your emotions inform you, but they don't control you. When you lead your life with intention, clarity, and emotional awareness, you tap into your deepest potential. The beauty of living beyond emotions is that it doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you become a master of your emotions, feeling them, understanding them, and then choosing how to respond. You create a life where your actions are guided by your purpose and values, not by momentary emotional reactions. This is emotional freedom. It's the freedom to live fully, authentically, and with deep emotional wisdom. So, as you continue your journey, remember that your emotions are not your identity. They are messages that guide you, but they don't define you. You are the one in control, the one who leads your emotions, and the one who creates the life you desire. Emotional freedom, achieving balance and peace. As we reach the final stretch of this journey, let's talk about what emotional freedom really means. We've explored emotional awareness, regulation, reframing, and breaking free from habitual emotional cycles. But now, we're focusing on the end goal, emotional freedom. What does it look like to truly achieve emotional balance and peace? And how can you apply everything you've learned to live a more fulfilling life? At its core, emotional freedom is the ability to experience emotions fully, without being controlled by them. It's about creating space between an emotional trigger and your reaction, so that you can choose your response with intention, instead of being swept away by the emotion itself. Emotional freedom doesn't mean you never feel anger, sadness, fear, or anxiety. Those emotions are part of being human, and they are valuable messengers. But it does mean that you can choose how you want to engage with them. Imagine waking up in the morning and feeling the full range of emotions, without fear of being overwhelmed by them. You feel sadness, joy, excitement, and frustration, but none of those feelings dictate how you go through your day. You feel the emotion, you understand it, and you respond in a way that is aligned with your goals and values. That's emotional freedom, the ability to live your life while experiencing emotions as a natural part of it, rather than letting them hijack your decisions, behaviors, or sense of self. Achieving emotional freedom requires balance. It's the balance between accepting and honoring your emotions, while also creating the space to make thoughtful, deliberate choices. It's not about suppressing or denying emotions, but about learning how to process them in a way that empowers you rather than holding you back. Emotional balance is the skill of being able to feel deeply without being overwhelmed. It's the ability to take ownership of your emotional state and use it as a tool for personal growth, rather than as a barrier to living a fulfilling life. One of the keys to emotional freedom is non-attachment. It's easy to get attached to the idea that certain emotions should never be felt, or that we must always feel a certain way to be happy or successful. But attachment to emotional outcomes can create suffering. When we believe that we should always be happy, or that we shouldn't feel anxiety or anger, we set ourselves up for frustration. Why? Because emotions are unpredictable. They come and go, and no matter how much we try to control them, they will always ebb and flow. Non-attachment means acknowledging and feeling your emotions without clinging to them. It's about understanding that emotions are temporary, and they do not define you. You are not your anger, your sadness, or your fear. These are transient states that arise, but they are not permanent markers of who you are. When you let go of the need to control or hold on to emotions, you free yourself to experience life more fully, without being trapped by fleeting emotional states. This doesn't mean that you don't care about your emotions or that you become indifferent. Quite the opposite. Non-attachment means that you can fully feel and experience your emotions, but without letting them take control. You can honor your emotions without identifying with them or letting them dictate your actions. This practice of emotional non-attachment gives you the freedom to experience a broader range of emotions without being tied down by any one of them. A critical component of emotional freedom is self-acceptance. This involves embracing all parts of yourself, including your emotional experiences, with compassion and understanding. Too often, we beat ourselves up for feeling certain emotions, especially those we label as negative. We think, I shouldn't be angry, or I shouldn't feel anxious. But self-acceptance means acknowledging that all emotions are part of being human, and none of them make you any less worthy or valuable. When you accept yourself fully, emotions, imperfections, and all, you free yourself from the shame or guilt that often accompanies emotional experiences. You stop judging yourself for feeling a certain way and start seeing your emotions as natural, human reactions to life. This self-acceptance allows you to let go of the need for perfection. You no longer have to pretend to be emotionally invulnerable or immune to hardship. You can feel emotions without being ruled by them. And the more you practice self-acceptance, the more you realize that emotional freedom is not about being emotionally perfect, it's about being emotionally authentic. It's about showing up as you truly are, with all your emotions, and knowing that you can handle them without letting them derail you. Another element of emotional freedom is mindful awareness. It's about being present with yourself and your emotions, without judgment or resistance. This awareness is the practice of tuning into your emotional state without allowing it to dictate your actions. When you are mindful, you observe your feelings with curiosity rather than judgment. You don't push away uncomfortable emotions, you let them be. And by allowing them to exist without resistance, you break the cycle of reactivity that often comes with emotional turmoil. Incorporating mindfulness into your daily life creates a sense of emotional stability. It allows you to observe your emotions as they come and go, without getting caught up in them. When you practice mindfulness, you become more attuned to your inner world, and you can see your emotions for what they are, temporary experiences, not permanent truths. The more you cultivate this mindful awareness, the more empowered you become in your emotional responses. You realize that you can feel intensely and still maintain control over how you engage with the world. Living with emotional freedom also involves embracing change. Emotions are fluid, and so is life. Nothing stays the same forever. When you embrace the natural ebb and flow of emotions, you become more adaptable and resilient. You learn to ride the waves of emotion rather than being knocked over by them. You realize that emotions are not obstacles, they are opportunities for growth. Every emotional experience is a chance to learn more about yourself, your values, and how you navigate the world. To truly live beyond emotions, you must also take responsibility for your emotional state. This means recognizing that, while you can't control every emotional trigger or external event, you have the power to choose how you respond. You are responsible for your emotional experience. If something makes you angry, you can choose how to express that anger. If something makes you sad, you can allow yourself to grieve, but you can also decide how you want to move through that sadness. When you take responsibility for your emotions, you reclaim your power. Finally, emotional freedom comes when you trust yourself. Trust that you can handle whatever emotions come your way. Trust that you have the tools, wisdom, and resilience to navigate life's emotional challenges. With emotional freedom, you learn to trust that, no matter what emotions arise, you can always find your way through them with grace and awareness. So, as we wrap up this journey, remember, emotional freedom isn't about avoiding or suppressing emotions. It's about understanding, accepting, and responding to them in a way that aligns with your deepest values. It's about feeling emotions without letting them control you, and living a life that is guided by intention, purpose, and self-awareness. With emotional freedom, you can embrace all that life has to offer, joy, pain, excitement, and sorrow, without being overwhelmed by any of it. You are the master of your emotional world. And in that mastery, you find true peace and balance.